Welcome to the TBC podcast, where we discuss curious, thought provoking, and sometimes controversial ideas through the lens of biblical wisdom. I'm your host, Keith Wood. Our guest today is Dr. Meger Chappell. Dr. Chappell, thanks so much for being on the show. In this season, we're going to be doing a series on practical insights, and today's topic is setting personal goals. So, why are goals important, and what are some practical guidelines that we could maybe use to develop a mindset necessary to live life in a purposeful manner? So, Dr. Chappell, I'm really happy to have you on the show, and we brought you here because we think you're the perfect person to speak to this topic. So, just to go over a little bit of your background, you are the business department chair here at Trinity Baptist College. You're a retired U.S. Navy captain. And then your education background, I have to take a deep breath to get through all of this. So, you have a PhD in business administration, an executive Juris Doctorate, Juris Master, an MBA, an MA in Human Resources Management, an MS in Management, an MA in Negotiation, Conflict Resolution, and Peace Building, another MA in Military Operational Art and Science, and you're working on finishing up a Juris Doctorate as well as a doctorate in Law and Policy with a Master's in Criminal Justice. Did I get it all right?
You got it.
It is a mouthful. That is very impressive. And in addition to all of that, you're married, you've got 4 children, just one left in the house. Most of them are grown and off doing their own thing. It's awesome. We're very happy to have you here. So you're clearly a very ambitious person. Concerning goal setting, have you always been an ambitious person? You always had something on your mind, or was there a decisive moment in your life in which you envisioned a change for yourself and started setting goals?
Well, Keith, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure and both a pleasure and an honor. And to answer your question about goal setting, I think I've always been that way, thanks to my parents. And I grew up in a pretty competitive household with 7 kids. There were
Wow.
7 of us. And so for me, life has been about fun competition, but of course, serving God first and foremost, but been about fun competition in a fun way. And when we talk about competitiveness and goal setting, I look back to my early age. My mother was really big on education, and my father was as well, but my mom, I think, more so on education. And so one of her big things was she always talked to us about setting goals, and then my dad always reminded us of accomplishing those goals. But and goals were in my family, and I look back at my younger age in particular, were meant to sort of drive us towards something. My parents used to always say, "Don't go through life just aimlessly wandering about." You want to have something in place that you can shoot for or aim for, whether it be small or something, mid-size or something long range. But it challenged me to keep thinking. And for the most part, I think right around my freshman year of high school is where that sort of solidified for me. I was a little bit more serious than most kids my age. I was an athlete, of course, also. And then one thing that I didn't mention there that I'm really passionate about is martial arts. I've been 42 years of studying martial arts, and I think that has really helped me. A huge part, again, worshiping God, my faith. I always tell people that for me, it's God, family, and martial arts, and then the Navy fit in there somewhere, right? It's part of my career. So I think all those things, it was just the environment that I was exposed to for the main part, particularly during my youth, that helped me be goal-driven and goal-oriented as a person.
Okay, so definitely your parents played a tremendous role in
Absolutely.
instilling that virtue in you. Did you, I guess, what role do you see natural aptitude as playing in that? And maybe with 7 siblings, was it 6 siblings or 7
Well,
siblings?
there were 6 siblings, including me, made
So
7.
7 total.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, 7 total. Do you think that that was something that you would have in common with your siblings, an interest in setting goals and attaining these different things, or did you feel like you might have even had a particular natural aptitude toward that, toward goal
hmm
setting?
I think that's a great question. It's also a fair question. But for the most part, I think all of us were sort of goal driven, except for maybe 1 or 2 of my siblings who just kind of let things happen to them. But at the end of the day, I look at their lives now, and it probably turned out better than mine in some aspects. I'm wondering if I should have taken that approach. But in all seriousness, I think it was just a sort of a natural thing. We were with the 5 boys. We were always competing against each other. We
Hmm.
were all very close in age. I think the 3 of us were competing, although albeit interested in different things. But there was a level of competition, whether it be a bid for my parents' attention or what have you. or okay, oh, I got an A in math. Well, I got a B. We're all
Hmm.
separate. But the real, I think the people that inspired me the most in my household when it comes to siblings, I would have to say, would be one of my older sisters, because she was the real deal. When we want to talk about the real deal as far as goal setting and being able to accomplish things, and just sort of driven from an early age. So yeah, there was that influence, but I think for me mainly it was sort of, there was some aptitude there, but when I look back, we were all kind of goal driven. Maybe
Hmm.
not as much as each other, but everybody was usually aiming for something, and some of it was because we just behave that way. It's the environment, the culture that we
Uh-huh.
grew up in. But again, not such that we didn't enjoy life as children or that we stepped on each other. It was fun. We had fun with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had fun with it.
So particularly with your relationship with your sister, who it sounds like you had a special kind of maybe
Yeah, yeah,
competition there,
yeah, yeah,
camaraderie.
yeah.
Did you feel like there were things that you did intentionally in that relationship to foster this
Oh,
competition?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And most of that was what we would call just ribbing each other.
Uh-huh.
Ribbing each other. She was older than I was, of course. But when I look back on it, there was an immense amount of respect on my part and admiration for what she had to deal with and what she had to endure in her life, with some illness along the way,
Mm.
some other things. But she endured and persevered, and I looked at that, and more so there was that silent motivation, if you will, the competition to say, hey, I can do that also. Because there were times where I looked at some things and go, wow, this is pretty challenging. My focus in high school, for example, was math and science. That was one of my areas that I love, and I'm still passionate about to this day, although I didn't choose that path as far as
Hmm.
education. Well, graduate education,
Right.
undergrad, yes, but as far as graduate education, and she was gifted in that area, and so I worked very hard, particularly in chemistry, to try and achieve that level of success from an academic perspective. So it was that, and then I think more so just learning how, when we talk about things from a Christian perspective, of how to deal with all types of people, be engaging and appreciate different types of people. I come from a very multicultural family, for example. I leveraged that and took advantage of that because I saw, as I was younger, I saw my sister and how she dealt with all sorts of different people. Her friend, it was just a very heterogeneous population of friends, and I kind of mirrored that, as a young man,
Hmm.
even into my adulthood, and just being able to look at people for who they were, right? And so that was a huge thing for me as far as being motivated, and learning how to deal with people, learning how to deal with circumstances, learning how to, if you could, be nice to everyone, right? And so those were competitive things for me. I looked at that because the majority of the people that I hung around or befriended in high school didn't understand how that worked. A lot of them didn't.
Mm.
They weren't mean, per se, but they weren't as diversified when we talk about culture. So I made it a point to challenge myself. That was one of the things I made it. Be nice to everybody. Get to know everybody. Um, Befriend people. Invite people to church, for example. Those sort of things. And so, yeah, that was definitely a motivating factor that my sister. When I looked at her, a lot of that was incurred just from her being exposed to her and watching her in action, if you will.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, it's bringing up things in my own life that I hadn't really thought about. But when I was in college, my then girlfriend, now wife, we were students together, and we would always sign up to take the same classes. And looking back on it, definitely pushed me to to try harder in those classes. I was not going to
Absolutely.
come behind her. So let's suppose someone's listening right now and they're
Yeah.
thinking, "Wow, I love this idea of having that healthy competition. I don't have that in my own life right now." Are there things that you think a person could do to kind of foster that kind of healthy competition? And maybe you answered this a little bit
Yeah.
with your last
Yeah.
question, but maybe you could say a little bit more about, I need to establish relationships that are going to
Hmm.
push me to set goals and
Hmm.
to do better.
Hmm.
Could you say a word about how a person could do that?
Absolutely. One of the things that I was always, taught is that you pick your three closest people that you hang around, and that's more than likely what you're going to be like and who you're going to emulate, right? So I always say pick good company. And so we're in a Christian environment here.
Mm.
I I will tell you that the majority of the people in my life, even as a young man that I chose to hang around, one, for a start, they believe in God. They had some sort of ground. They may not have been as committed as I, but that was the basic foundation. You have a choice, is what I tell people. You get to make a choice of what your life looks like, what you invite into your life, what you invite into your home. So start there with making good decisions for the type of people you want to be involved with, and then write everything down. In the beginning, we
Mm,
have technology now. You can do anything on your phone if you got a computer. When you think it, therefore you become it. So I'm a big fan of that. Start writing things down. Find people that are in similar fields or have a similar vision. Get to know them. Reach out. There are plenty of people out here, good people, wholesome people who are willing and ready to mentor. But oftentimes it takes the individual to make that first step, to take that first leap of faith. And then more importantly, be willing to ask questions. We all know we can wake up in the morning. We know we have to brush our teeth. We know we have to take a shower before we go to bed. Make that those regular things a part of your everyday life when it comes to goal setting, for example. And I think we're getting into talking about goal setting, but that's what I would tell people is first sit down, find the time to invest in yourself. And so many of us don't do that, and find out, figure out what it is you want to do, because I'm a firm believer you can do anything you want to do, through faith, hard work. There's this saying, hard work beats talent when talent won't work hard. I've seen it in my own family. I've seen it amongst friends who have worked very hard. I have a friend now who's an attorney, a well-known attorney, and I won't use his name here, in the United States of America. He's had some very, specific, if you will, high-profile cases.
mhm.
He had a GED. He had a GED, and so what did he do different than anyone else? It may not have been aptitude. He sat down. He established some goals. He took it step by step. He was realistic, and then he pushed himself. He challenged himself because he knew in the end that's what he wanted. But then he made good personal decisions about the types of people he dealt with, um, where and what he needed to do to get what he needed to get done, right? And then being willing to accept failure, because we're not always going to succeed at the first opportunity or the first chance that we encounter something. Being willing to accept failure, being willing to accept criticism, okay, and then brush yourself off, pick yourself up, and get back in the fight. That's really what it boils down to. And it's a willingness, and it's the discipline to be able to do that. It's the discipline of getting things done.
Mhm.
Uh, and if you can do that, for the most part, I'm a firm believer. Again, I circumscribe all of this that I've just mentioned with my faith, right? And if you can do that, anything is accomplished. You can accomplish anything. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid, but I changed my mind, not because I didn't feel like I could do that. I got inspired when I became a military officer by ships
Mhm.
and all the great things that the Navy has to offer. So then I set my focus on becoming a captain of a ship one day. And at the time, I'm like, wow, I look back on that and I go, how did I accomplish that? Well, it's baby steps, baby steps, and through faith, through faith. And I never let go. I stayed with that. I'm like, this is what I want. Were there failures along the way? Absolutely. But I never gave up. I had some great people also, great people that I'd surrounded myself with, mentors, people who were more knowledgeable than me about certain things, people who I knew would push me, would tell me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear, and would be there for me when I felt. My wife, first and foremost, and would just keep inspiring, keep encouraging, and never say, "Oh yeah, you should quit at that thing." No, pick yourself up, get back in the fight, and we've got your back. So
I want to hone in specifically on the point you made about writing it down, because that sounds like a great practical step that anybody could do when it comes to setting goals. But what exactly do you mean when you say to write it down? Do you envision something like keeping a journal, or some people will write a little note to themselves and stick it on their bathroom mirror? Like, what does
yeah,
this process of writing it down look like?
absolutely, great question, Keith. So all of that.
Okay.
So let's start with a journal. My wife will tell you I probably have more journals than anybody you
Mm,
know. I love keeping the little books, journals. I go into different places. I'll find a journal. I'll buy it. And I'll fill it up. Right. And for me, I start with a basic calendar. For example, I plan my day out. It's meticulous as that may sound, because it gives me the opportunity to look at things. When I write something down, for example, planning my day out, I can look at it. Is it always planned out? Am I always going to stick with everything there? No, but it's a starting point. And when you write things down, I believe it's also a starting point. It gets you to thinking. For example, if I said to myself when I was a lieutenant in the Navy. I said, hey, I want to be a commanding officer of a ship one day. Well, there's a guide out there that tells me, the Navy has a guide that tells me the majority of the things that I need to do to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But where my journal comes into play is I take each one of those things and I break them down. And I go, okay, by this day, I need to have this done. Now I'm goal setting. And I keep revisiting that. I revisit it once a week. I look at it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I start having sub bullets, right? And it's amazing how the mind works, because you start to see, when you start to see progress, it's just like planning a project. You start to see it fill up. You start to identify holes. You start to look and say, oh my goodness, I've got 80% of the things I need to get done. And you're checking them off as you go down. And then you may add a little bit more, but then you're creating that white space. The one thing I will say, writing those things down helped me also create white space for, make sure that I had space there for my family, space there for worshiping. Your mental mindset, mental health, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Your mental health is very important. Physical health is very important. Leaving time to be able to accomplish those things. And so you're not being inefficient. Your day is just here, and you're running from this place to that place. And you really, at the end of the day, I find that when I don't do that often, I don't get anything done. I don't get the important things that matter to me done, or I miss an event with my daughter. Now I've got to scramble. So getting organized in your personal life, I think, is very important. Something that I talk to the students about, even getting their own personal work done. You don't have to be as meticulous to nail every minute of your day, but when you write things down, oftentimes you'll commit to them. And if you don't, you'll just revisit. But you got to write it down and revisit it. So sometimes that sticky note on the mirror, I'm a huge fan of that. But then what do I do with that, right? I will
Mm-hmm.
make a note. If I'm somewhere, I keep a writing instrument with me or a pen like now. I make a note, and then that gets transcribed into my journal or to my calendar. But it's really about time management and being efficient. And the last thing I'll tell you, Keith, is that I often tell people one of the most precious resources we have, and I would say this to my folks in the Navy all the time, is it's people, of course. And I don't, people are important, absolutely. But our time is one of the most precious resources that we have. And if we don't manage it right, it also equates to not doing, I believe, what God put us here on earth to do. Right? You can be very stagnant and not maximizing your full potential.
And it sounds like in the way you described it, it sounds like a big part of being organized is just breaking those things down into bite-sized chunks,
Absolutely.
right? Who can go out and just become a captain of a
Yeah.
ship?
Yeah.
Nobody. But
Yeah.
who can go out and start a course, or do
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever that next
Absolutely.
step is,
Absolutely.
right?
It's the baby steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think that's some really great practical advice. If we could, I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about the relationship between setting goals and being flexible. I would imagine that things have not always gone as planned in your life. So, what role has flexibility played for you? And maybe have there been moments in your career where your goals changed dramatically as a result of needing to be responsive to some situation? So, how did you adjust your mindset and realign your path?
No, that's another great question. Flexibility. We have a saying in the military. It's and particularly in the Navy, we call it semper gumby. Always flexible. Goal setting is important, but the other bit of advice I would give anyone is realize that if you have to be willing, you must be willing to look at those goals and the things that you've written down and pivot. All right, and that could come at any point in time. I go specifically. I reflect on my life as a military officer. The name of that game is flexibility.
Hmm.
I don't get a vote. 51% of the time, I didn't get a vote when I walk aboard a ship. I didn't get a vote when I walked into a squadron. Uh, World events drive things, and it's tough when you have a family, and you have to be able to flex to that. So what I oftentimes would tell people, especially in my line of work, particularly in the military, this could apply to any vocation, is have a backup plan. Okay, have a backup plan. Know what you're going to do, and know what you're going to do in the event of. And we call it branches and sequels, right? And even if X happens, well, here's what I'm likely going to have to do in order to mitigate. It's when you don't do that and it becomes frustrating. Okay, and that requires a little bit of work, because you don't always know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. For example, I know that at any given moment as a military officer that I could deploy. So what does that mean for me, right? So I have to have my family in a position to where if I'm gone tomorrow within a 24-hour period, if I'm gone, healthcare, insurance, all that other stuff, benefits, whatever my wife needs in case I never return, unfortunately, that she's good to go. She can function without me, right? And so that kind of thinking is important. And then when things happen, not getting frustrated, realizing that life is going to happen. It may be that your whole plan gets thrown off track. Okay, so what? Take a deep breath, figure out what the next move is. Frustration leads to chaos. And if you're frustrated by the uncertain or the unknown, it never has a good ending. It never has a good. Clear heads prevail. So yes, those things happen. But what I would tell people is take a deep breath, figure out your next move. Okay, and if you got to develop a new plan, so be it.
But interestingly, it sounds like a lot of what flexibility looked like for you was not just a willingness to go with whatever happened, but a willingness to plan for these different contingencies, right?
Absolutely.
You had to have your family's health care lined up in
Yes,
case you were called out
absolutely,
and things like
absolutely.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
And in life, I would tell young people, if you're working a job, and this is not, and I would have this conversation with my own kids, is not to
Hmm.
fear monger, but it's the art of planning. What happens if you lose your job today? Well, you start thinking from there. Well, how do I pay my rent? How do I do X, Y, Z? So knowing that, well, what does that mean? What steps do I need to take today to mitigate or offset some of those negative repercussions that could come about as a result of me losing my job? So maybe I have to save more money. Maybe I have to start looking for another job, just in case. So you start going down this path. It's like death when we look at it. No one wants to walk in and talk to, for example, with my financial advisor, and we've had to. No one wants to talk about death,
Hmm.
but we all should because it's inevitable. So what happens when I die? Well, that's important, right? It's planning. It's thinking like in terms of if I die, how do I want to leave my family? Right? Does it sound dramatic or drastic that I would apply that same thought process to everyday life? Maybe, depending on who you are. But for me, those are the things that keep me afloat and keep me knowing that if something were unfortunate to happen to me, that my family would go on without me and they wouldn't have to suffer or because I didn't plan or I didn't do the things that I was supposed to. I apply that to my everyday life.
Yeah, and having that plan in place, I would imagine, helps to prevent a lot of the chaotic feelings that
Absolutely.
bring on additional problems and
Absolutely.
additional
Yeah.
stress.
And even with that, there are still things that I think of that, well, I could probably be doing that a little bit better. Or, hey, I need to, just as I'm
Hmm.
talking to you, right? I'm like, yeah, I probably need to go tighten this up. But, and again, but none of this is meant to overstress. I tell people, don't stress about it. The more time you spend planning, the few minutes a day, the hour a day, the hour a week, the less you have to stress about it. Enjoy life, right?
Yeah,
But in order to enjoy life, we have to prepare ourselves.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, when I think about all the things that you've accomplished, all the degrees you have, I think a lot of people would have been fine stopping at a number of those different benchmarks. I'll captain a ship or I'll get a doctorate, or one of the two. I don't need to do both. But how do you personally stay motivated while you're working on something as demanding as another
Yeah.
doctorate degree or a Juris Doctorate after already achieving so much? How do you keep that motivation going? And I guess, does there ever come a point where you say, I've accomplished enough goals, I'm good?
Yeah, I think at this point in my life, my wife's made that decision for me.
Okay.
So, but I enjoy learning. I go back and I learned how to read at home with my mom, of course, and I learned how to read by sitting next to her, reading medical books,
Hmm.
and that's how I learned how to read. She would have her medical books out. She was at the point when I was young. She went back to school to get her RN, and I would sit next to her, and she had a what was called a physician's desk reference, and in there it had all the different types of medications, and that she had to memorize to become a nurse for studying, etc. And I would just sit there next to her, and she would say, "Come on!" And so I'd go there and I'd sit, and I just fell in love with learning at that age, and 5, 6 years old, and I go to school and I'm pronouncing words, and they're like, "Where'd you get? Who's this kid?" But it was
Hmm.
fun. I had fun with it. So for me, the academic portion, I think getting a PhD was a goal. But after that, Everything else was because I was just enjoying learning, and I said, hey, I may as well get the piece of paper for it. But more importantly, when you look at my resume, my academic resume, okay, portfolio, every single degree that I've gotten has been with the intent of being able to help someone. That's where my focus has been, which is why I didn't delve into more into science, because I had an undergraduate with pre-law in chemistry. Okay, that those were my focuses.
Hmm.
But I didn't delve into science. I got enough science in my daily job as a professional career Navy officer. I put a lot of engineering practices and other things of that sort to work, especially as a ship CO. But more importantly, I chose business because I could help people as a consultant. I chose conflict and negotiation because as a professional mediator and an arbitrator, I can help people, whether it be pro bono, which I do a huge amount of pro bono work in that field. Uh, the military operational art strategy, that was a requirement to advance in my career. But every other single master's level master's level education that I got, or even with the doctoral level education that I've achieved, a law degree, that's all been geared towards being able to put myself in a position where I could help others. And service is a big part. The big S, I always tell people, is not Superman, it's serviceman. I love being able to help people achieve goals, help people see a path, and I do that under my consulting umbrella as well,
Hmm.
in my business. And it's just a wonderful feeling. So everything that I do is geared towards service. Yeah,
So
service and learning.
So it sounds so you've obviously got these values at play that are driving a lot of the things that you're choosing to do in your professional life. But it sounds like it started with curiosity,
It did.
that
It
kind of
did.
got you into being a learner to begin
It
with.
did.
Can you look back to specific things in your life that help foster that sense of curiosity for you? Because I think a lot of people would listen to that and think, man, I'd love to be a person who loves learning, and I just don't feel like I'm that person. Um, are there any moments where you can say like, wow, that really helped foster a sense of
Hmm.
curiosity in me?
Yes. So for me, it was my parents. I go back to my mother, who is a voracious learner. She loved learning, but she also had a sense of, and I was sharing this with some of my students the other day, of her her goal was always, how can I help someone? Who can I help? Um, and and that to me was the most important thing, is how can I help someone? But that curiosity, sitting next to her, looking at her books on pharmacokinetics and different subjects, and just watching her read through this, and she was a brilliant lady, and watching her go through this, and then teaching me at the same time, because I was a mama's boy,
Hmm.
right? And I was the one that was just really closest to her when she was, studying or doing that. I was always curious. Hey, mom, what you? Come on, sit down next to me. And then my father, whenever we would go places, sometimes we would always go, why is dad walking? And we have a car, and it would be maybe a couple blocks away. Well, he'd say, hey, let's take a walk. And during that walk, he would always point to things. He's like, hey, why do sidewalks have cracks in them? And we are like, we don't know, Dad. I mean,
Yeah.
well, why do we have traffic lights? Why do tree leaves grow a certain way? You know, basic lessons that were taught. And he wasn't the type of guy to just make stuff up. He was a smart guy. But that was phenomenal. And so I find myself, even in my younger age, doing that with my kids. And most of us would avoid, like, hey, let's go hide out. Dad wants somebody to walk to the store with him. But then you get to be to where you appreciate that sort of thing. Just that learning, the environment, that how we develop our children's minds is very important, I believe. And so for me, I was blessed and fortunate to have two parents that really value learning and really value life lessons. And more importantly, it wasn't about getting a degree. It was about learning and about understanding and appreciating the ability, God-given ability that He's bestowed upon us to be able to learn for the purpose of helping others, for the purpose of understanding, right? Asking questions, critical thinking. That's even at an early age. I credit this. I can go on and on about this, but I will tell you, both of my parents were very instrumental. The one thing that I wish I'd done better at, my father was really good. He could rebuild an automobile from the frame, like literally the
Wow.
electronics, the everything. I
Yeah.
mean, right? We've seen him do it. Uh, I didn't like getting dirty too much. So the two of my brothers took that talent and they have absolutely been blessed and they ran with it. But I understood the science behind it, but I didn't like getting dirty. But I wish I'd taken a little bit more interest in that when I look today. If I had to do one thing that, if you will, my bucket list is to become a mechanic. I'd love to be able to go back and do that.
Yeah.
So, but it was just being in an environment where constant learning was every discussion, every dinner table discussion was, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Just having fun with it.
Yeah.
Having fun with it.
I
So,
love those interactions. So you're really speaking my language because I'm a
yeah.
philosophy guy.
Oh, yeah.
And Plato and Aristotle, both for them, wonder was the beginning of philosophy.
Yes.
Aristotle said, paraphrasing, that philosophy begins with wonder. You look at the world and you say, this is an interesting thing. Let me see if I can learn something about that. Or let me
Yes.
think about that. And that's such a fundamental idea to really how people in the West have thought for thousands of years. And I think it's something that's cool that came out is, so we identified there's this relationship for you between curiosity and your desire to help people. And it sounds like there's kind of a reciprocal relationship between those two, where your mom showed you, we can help people if we learn
Absolutely.
this stuff. And that actually helps to foster a sense of curiosity too, that here's a goal you can accomplish. If you're willing to learn about some things, you can use those things to help people, right,
Absolutely.
and accomplish this goal. I think that's really cool. Another question for you: how do you balance ambition with realism when you're setting goals, whether that's personal or professional? Do you sense a tension between those things in your life, and how have you managed that?
Yeah, that's another great question. My wife and I've had this discussion about, you know, she uses the term of she always says, "Hey, is that realistic?" With some things that I've come up with, and sometimes it's just being grounded and having someone, a good partner that you're equally yoked with, that can look at you and go, "Hey, that's too much."
Hmm.
Okay, we need people again sometimes to tell. My wife is my biggest cheerleader, and I'm her biggest cheerleader. But when she tells me it's too much, I listen and I go, you know what? She's right. What am I doing? I'm climbing a mountain that it just keeps ascending, and I'm never going to get to the top of that mountain. And sometimes, what I do is I'll take a mental break and I'll pray and I ask God to, hey, is this something that is, I guess, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? It's asking yourself that and realizing that, well, when do I stop pushing myself to do that next thing? And it's not about degrees. For example, it could be like I literally envisioned myself last month. I said, you know what? I would like to push myself to enter a martial arts competition where I go and compete against, not people in my age group, maybe people about 10 years younger than me, and just train for a solid year, do this thing and win. And then I started asking myself, why would you do that? So I said, and I couldn't come up with a bunch of good answers other than pride and some other things, some bragging rights, right? And I've been down this path before in martial arts, and I talked to my wife about it, and she said, why would you do that? You've had a hip surgery, stick to teaching, all right? And so, yeah, that's where reality meets ambition, and the two kind of intersect in the reality,
Yeah, so surrounding yourself certainly by people that you trust,
Exactly.
and it sounds like having some humility there is going
Yeah,
to be
a little bit
important
of
as
humility,
well.
right? And so I
Yeah.
said, well, what can I do with that? Well, let me go and find someone else who may want to compete in a competition, do something great, maybe a middle-aged guy who's looking to do something great, because martial arts is about learning and discipline, but there's a competition element to that. So now, who can I invest in? So that becomes a question rather than me. Who can I invest in?
Yeah.
So I think I have a couple candidates. So we'll see.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So finding maybe different avenues to use those same
Yeah,
skills at
absolutely.
different life stages.
And I can live vicariously through them. So.
uh, okay. So shifting a little bit to where you're at today, and maybe some goals that you've got right now. How do you see the goals that you personally have right now reflecting the legacy that you hope to leave behind? Maybe you could, if you could, tie in some of the things that you've got going on right now with some of the values in your life.
Yeah, that's great. So right now, one of the things that I have going on is working with my sons to try. So my wife and I have a company, but what I would like to do is bring them in on I should say the ground floor, because their interests are all different, but trying to figure out how to incorporate their skill sets so that we can have a company that involves all of those different skill sets for my young men. We've been having that discussion. They're all in. They're all in. We just have to find more time to talk about the idea. But that's one of the things that I would really like to do, is leave behind a legacy, some sort of family legacy, that so I can bring them in, bring my daughter in, whatever skill sets they have. So now we're trying to figure out, and we're actually using AI to help with this idea, to figure out how we can merge all these different skill sets and come up with a business idea. And it's not about money. It's about, again, we're all driven towards service, right? Service. How do we help people, nonprofit, et cetera, to leave that living legacy? And one of the things that's one of the things I'm working on. And we've actually called it the Lilly Foundation, which my mother's name was Lily.
Mm.
And so we're going to name it the Lilly Foundation. And so trying to figure out how, and we want to build this thing out. That's one of the big things I'm working on right now. We talk about legacy. Yeah.
So bringing the family together and trying to
Absolutely.
leverage all the different gifts,
All the different
within
gifts,
your
the
family. I think that's
talents.
such a
Yeah.
cool vision for
Yeah.
your family.
Yeah, that's what we're working on. That's what's in work, and it's been we've been at that for about 2 months now.
That's
And so
awesome.
that's when you ask me what I'm working on, that's where, aside from my personal business, which I'm continuing to grow, that's where a lot of my energy on the weekends is going, with the Lilly Foundation. So,
Yeah. Maybe talk a little bit about, obviously you're engaged. I see you on campus engaged with students all the time. How do you see the work that you're doing with Trinity and with the students here as being representative of some of your own goals and your values?
yeah, that's a good one. Also, Keith, I got to tell you, here, one of the big things we're focusing on is a niche program for our business program. And the beauty and the wonder of is we're a small school, and so we're able to do. I visited UNF, I visited FSCJ, talked with some of the business professors there and some of the leadership there. And one of the things at Trinity that I believe is important for us to recognize is that we have a much smaller group. And so here, trying to work with the students to make sure that they understand, even though we have a smaller group, we're not a high school. We're a college, and because of that, is learning them how to execute the theoretical part of what we do as educators and as learners, but then the practical aspect of it also, right? And what I try and tell my students is, let's enter the semester, and I don't want you to worry about your grade. I want you to set some goals, right? We're going to give you the recipe for success. The recipe for success is, here's a textbook. Here's some things you have to read. Here's some things you have to comprehend. Let's have a discussion about those things. The test will come. We'll get to the exam, all right? But now we're trying to teach as much as we can the practical application of what you're learning. Many of our students are hands-on learners, and I found that out after my first semester teaching here. And once they get that practical application of putting those things to use, the light bulb starts to come on, and we start fostering that, and then we challenge them more, and we begin to challenge them more. And then what I'm beginning to see in the other professors in the business department, we're starting to see where students, they're yearning for more.
Hmm.
Give me more, and that's what we want. That's the type of academic environment we want to create. There's some competition there, right? Because the goal is, we want people to look at Trinity and go, yes, it's a small school, private Christian college. We're not, top tier MBA. You're not going to be able to, and we're working on an MBA program here soon. But we want people to be able to look at our business program and say, hey, that's where, they've got a really small, specialized niche program there. It sounds interesting. Let's check it out. That's what we're doing. So how do we do that? Well, one, the types of students we're bringing in and the types of students that we're producing. That's the goal right now. If I answered your, if I think I answered your
Yeah, I
question.
think
So,
I was able to make some connections there that
yeah,
I thought were cool between the way that you were raised actually and
yeah,
some of the values in terms of the curiosity
yeah,
and things like that you're trying to instill in students right
absolutely,
now, and again cultivate that yearning for learning.
absolutely.
Uh, uh, so I think that that's awesome. I think that we're blessed
Yeah.
to have you investing in our students in that way and trying to cultivate some of those values that made such a difference in your life.
Can I
Um,
say, Keith,
yeah.
I am blessed to be here, and I want to make sure you understand. This is truly a team effort. I've got some wonderful professors in the business department that, you know, are just really, dedicated to the students, or really have gotten on board with, with ideas. have brought forth great ideas that we're instituting. Mr. Berger with the mentorship program, Dr. Dugas taking our business program online. It is truly a teamwork effort here. Even to having a 80-year-old accounting professor, 81-year-old accounting professor who's hung with us, and unfortunately she'll be leaving us. But just the phenomenal people that are on our team that we bring in, and I've hired two new professors. One, my own accountant, who I've got to come in and teach some accounting classes, Mr. Cooper, and then another, Mr. Stevens, who was an executive at the Bank of America. So we're bringing in folks with practical experience. He's an MBA. Mr. Stevens is also an MBA. So we're trying to, again, we want to bring in seasoned professionals who've had the experience working in industry or in corporate, and then bring them in to help reinforce those pillars that I've just got done talking to you about. And I think we got there's so much wonderful
A
things
lot
that
of
I see on the
exciting stuff
horizon. It is on
happening.
the horizon. And then we're seeking ACBSP accreditation for our business program. That's a huge step for our business program, because it gets us into the running to be competitive with a lot of the other schools in the area. So we're
That's
excited about
awesome.
that.
Yeah, that
So
I appreciate you sharing that. Well, that's very exciting stuff. Dr. Chappell, I thank you for
yeah.
being here, for sharing some of your practical wisdom from your
Well, thank you.
experience. It's been a great time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Keith. All right.